Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. Alright, let's talk about one of the most feared, elusive, and merciless factions in the grim darkness of Warhammer 40k, the Drukhari. Unlike the monolithic Imperium or the zealous forces of chaos, the Drukhari exist in the shadows, striking like a dagger in the dark and vanishing before their enemies even understand what happened. They are not conquerors or crusaders, they are predators. Raiders who see the galaxy as nothing more than a vast hunting ground. To them, war is not a means to an end. It is the end. They seek suffering, not territory. They crave torment, not glory. And their cruelty is matched only by their insatiable hunger for power and pain. But there's something unusual about the Drukhari. They are not an empire in the traditional sense. Their dominion is not measured in planets held or armies stationed. Instead, they rule through fear, operating from the dark city of Koronis, launching strikes across the stars with terrifying precision. They appear, they slaughter, they capture, and then, just like that, they disappear. Their ships are like shadows, slipping in and out of real space through the twisted corridors of the webway, making them almost impossible to track. But what happens when a Drukhari fleet doesn't return? That's exactly the mystery we're diving into today. A powerful Drukhari raiding force entered the Koronis Expanse, a region already infamous for its hidden dangers, and was never seen again. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. It was as if they simply ceased to exist. And for a race as cunning and adaptable as the Drukhari, that is not normal. So what really happened in the Koronis Expanse? Was it an ambush? A warp anomaly? A betrayal from within? Or is there something lurking in the void that even the Drukhari couldn't escape? Let's break it down. The Koronis Expanse is the kind of place that makes even the most hardened voidfarers think twice before venturing too deep. It's a vast and largely uncharted region of space, lying beyond the grasp of the Imperium, filled with forgotten relics, rogue planets, and warp anomalies that defy explanation. Some call it a lawless frontier, a place where the desperate and the foolish go to seek fortune. Others see it as a cursed expanse, a place where entire fleets have disappeared without a trace. And yet, despite all its dangers, it has always held a special kind of allure, especially for those who thrive in the shadows. For the Drukhari, the Koronis Expanse is more than just a hunting ground, it's an opportunity. The region is riddled with isolated human colonies, rogue traders operating beyond the watchful eye of the Imperium, and lost ships drifting like carrion waiting to be picked clean. For a race that survives by raiding, capturing, and inflicting suffering, this region is a goldmine. No Astra Militarum battalions standing guard, no Astartes chapters watching every movement, just easy targets waiting to be taken. And let's not forget the legends of ancient Xenos artifacts hidden within its depths. The Drukhari are always searching for new weapons, new ways to manipulate suffering, and the Expanse is full of long-forgotten remnants of civilizations that disappeared ages ago. But if it were just about easy prey, the mystery of the vanished fleet wouldn't be so disturbing. Because the Koronis Expanse is not just a place of opportunity. It's a place of things best left undisturbed. Even in the darkest corners of Koronis, whispers circulate about the horrors that lurk within this void. Imperial explorers have reported entire planets seemingly abandoned overnight, with no signs of war or struggle, just empty cities where the wind howls through broken streets. Some believe the warp runs thin in this part of the galaxy, allowing things from the Immaterium to slip through in ways they shouldn't. Others talk of dead systems where energy signatures spike without reason, only for anyone investigating to be lost soon after. And then there are the rogue trader logs, the ones that don't make it back to Terra, full of accounts describing ships that seem to blink out of existence, as if something simply reached out and took them. For the Drukhari, who consider themselves masters of the void, places like this are both a challenge and a temptation. Their arrogance is part of what makes them so dangerous. They believe they are untouchable, that nothing can truly outmaneuver them. That's what makes the loss of an entire fleet so unsettling. This isn't the Imperium losing a few patrols to a warp storm. This isn't an orc warband getting lost because they were too reckless. This was a Drukhari strike force, battle-hardened, experienced, and used to fighting on their own terms. And yet, something in the Koronis Expanse proved them wrong. So what exactly happened? Was it something lurking in the depths, some unknown Xenos force waiting in ambush? Was it the warp, playing tricks on even the most agile of hunters? Or did the Drukhari simply underestimate the region, thinking it was just another weak, vulnerable frontier ripe for exploitation? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear. This wasn't just a random loss. Something in the Koronis Expanse fought back, and it won. The disappearance of the Drukhari fleet in the Koronis Expanse isn't just another footnote in the long list of strange events plaguing this lawless region. It's an anomaly that doesn't fit the usual pattern of warfare, raiding, or even the occasional warp-related disaster. Drukhari fleets don't just vanish. They retreat, they regroup, they sometimes even turn on each other in elaborate betrayals, but they don't simply cease to exist without leaving some trace behind. And yet, that's exactly what seems to have happened. The fleet in question wasn't just some minor raiding party. By all accounts, it was a well-equipped and seasoned force, led by a cabal known for its brutal efficiency. We're talking multiple raiding ships, enough firepower to raise an entire planetary system if needed, and a strike force that had likely seen centuries of successful ambushes. They had a clear objective: sweep through a set of vulnerable human colonies, extract slaves, loot whatever relics or weapons they could find, and be gone before the Imperium even noticed. It was supposed to be routine, a hunt, nothing more. But somewhere along the way, the hunters became the hunted. The first hints that something had gone terribly wrong came when lesser cabals expecting to trade in captured slaves and plunder received nothing. No word, no shipments, no signs of return. At first, this wasn't unusual. Drukhari commanders are notorious for hoarding their best spoils, withholding information even from supposed allies. But as days turned into weeks, even the most arrogant of Commorrag's denizens started whispering. Something was off. Then came the scattered reports. A rogue trader operating in the Expanse swore he'd seen the wreckage of sleek, barbed Drukhari ships floating lifelessly in the void. Another claimed to have detected energy signatures resembling the dying pulse of webway portals collapsing in on themselves. Something that should never happen unless something went catastrophically wrong. There were even those who insisted they'd picked up strange, distorted signals that sounded almost like distress calls, but wrong, as if the voices were stretched and fragmented, broken beyond recognition. But here's the thing: none of these reports were ever fully verified. No one who went looking for this ghost fleet ever came back with solid proof. The Imperium naturally dismissed the whole affair. They had no reason to care about some Xenos pirates disappearing into the void. To them, this was a best-case scenario, one less Drukhari force to deal with. But to those who understand the nature of the Drukhari, this wasn't something to be ignored. Theories began to form, each one more disturbing than the last. Some suggested the fleet had been betrayed from within, torn apart in a brutal power struggle before it could even reach Commorragh. But why would the victors leave no trace of themselves behind? Others believed they had encountered something in the Expanse they simply couldn't handle. An enemy so overwhelming that even their speed and cunning weren't enough to escape. Then there were the darker theories, that the fleet had fallen victim to a warp anomaly so severe that it swallowed them whole, erasing them from real space entirely. What makes this mystery even more unsettling is the complete absence of survivors. Not a single captured Drukhari was paraded through the streets of an Imperial world. No stray escape pods were found drifting in the void. If this had been an ambush by the Imperium, or even an attack by rival Xenos, there would be some trace left behind. Wreckage, prisoners, battle scars. But instead, there was nothing. Just silence. And that silence is what makes this incident so terrifying. Because if even the Drukhari, with all their cruelty, cunning, and mastery of the void, could be erased so completely, then what does that say about whatever they encountered in the Koronis Expanse? If there's one thing the Imperium is known for, it's its sheer, unrelenting stubbornness. It might not always be the most tactically brilliant force in the galaxy, but when it wants something, or when it wants something dead, it has a way of making it happen through sheer brute force. So, could the Imperium have orchestrated the disappearance of the Drukhari fleet in the Koronis Expanse? It's not impossible, but if they did, it would have been one hell of an operation. Let's start with the obvious. The Imperium has been dealing with Drukhari raids for millennia. These Xeno scum slip in through the webway, strike fast, and disappear before Imperial forces can react. It's a game of cat and mouse, except the cat is blind and the mouse has a teleporting dagger. The idea that the Imperium could not only track a Drukhari fleet, but trap it so effectively that not a single ship escaped, that would mean they had intel, preparation, and most importantly, a way to shut down the Drukhari's most dangerous advantage, their mobility. Theoretically, the Imperium does have some tools that could make this happen. There are specialized void warfare doctrines used against elusive Xenos threats, including tactics designed to limit or disrupt enemy movement. We've seen cases where the Adeptus Mechanicus and Imperial Navy have managed to predict webway breaches and deploy countermeasures in advance. Some rogue trader houses, particularly the more ruthless ones, have experience in laying ambushes for Dark Eldar raiders, using decoys to lure them into kill zones. And of course, if the Astartes were involved, things could have escalated even further. Imagine a scenario where an Imperial commander, sick of watching Drukhari raids pick apart vulnerable colonies, finally had enough. Maybe they worked with a rogue trader who had gathered data on Drukhari hunting patterns, identifying a region where they were likely to strike next. A trap is laid, seemingly defenseless outposts broadcasting distress signals, luring the raiders in. But instead of weak colonists and desperate survivors, the Drukhari find themselves boxed in by pre-positioned Imperial ships, long-range batteries cutting off their escape routes. And then, the real hammer falls. Perhaps a fleet of Astartes strike cruisers, emerging from concealment, or a Mechanicus fleet using some arcane technology to destabilize the webway and sever their only escape. Sounds plausible, right? The problem is, if that's what happened, why hasn't the Imperium taken credit? This is an empire that loves to boast about its victories, especially against Xenos filth. If an entire Drukhari fleet was wiped out in an ambush, we'd be hearing about it. Some Lord Admiral would be parading the wreckage of their ships through the streets of a hive world, declaring it a holy victory for the Emperor. Yet there's silence, not just from the Drukhari, but from the Imperium itself. No gloating, no trophies, no evidence that they even know what happened. There's also the fact that an operation like this would require near-perfect execution. The Imperium is not exactly known for its surgical precision. Could they really have timed everything so perfectly that none of the Drukhari escaped? That's hard to believe. Even at their worst, the Drukhari are survivors. Their ships are fast, agile, and equipped with technology that lets them slip away when things get too dangerous. The idea that every single ship in the fleet was caught, disabled, and destroyed before any could send word back to Kamara? That's a level of efficiency the Imperium rarely achieves, even with the best strategists in play. Some believe that if the Imperium was responsible, it wasn't just a fleet battle, it was something bigger. A secret weapon, an experimental void trap, or even a psychic assault designed to cripple the Drukhari before they even realized what was happening. Maybe this wasn't just an ambush, but a test. A hidden project designed to counter the webway, a new form of warfare developed in the shadows. And if that's the case, then the real question isn't just how they did it, but who, within the Imperium, was capable of pulling it off. But there's another angle to consider, one that makes this theory even stranger. If the Imperium had truly succeeded in obliterating a Drukhari fleet, wouldn't Commorragh have retaliated? Wouldn't there have been a wave of brutal revenge raids, Cabals striking out in fury against Imperial holdings? Yet, there's been no evidence of that either. The Drukhari are angry about the disappearance, yes, but not in the way you'd expect if they knew it was the Imperium's doing. So was it an Imperial ambush? It's possible. But if it was unlike any seen before, flawless, efficient, and completely devoid of the usual Imperial grandstanding. And that, more than anything, makes it feel off. Like if the Imperium was involved, they didn't want anyone to know. And in a galaxy where war is waged as much for propaganda as it is for survival, why would they keep it a secret? If there's one thing that can make even the Drukhari hesitate, it's the warp. For all their arrogance, all their mastery of real space, the Dark Eldar want nothing to do with the raw, chaotic madness of chaos. And it makes sense. Unlike the Imperium, which is dependent on the warp for travel and communication, or the Astartes, who have spent millennia fighting the forces of the ruinous powers, the Drukhari don't need the warp. They avoid it, fear it, hate it, because to them, it's not just an existential threat, it's something that could literally end them. So, could the forces of chaos be responsible for the disappearance of the Drukhari fleet in the Koronis Expanse? Absolutely. In fact, out of all the theories, this one might be the most terrifying. Because if chaos was involved, it means those Drukhari didn't just die. They suffered something far, far worse. Let's look at the evidence. The Koronis Expanse has long been known as a place where the warp bleeds into real space in strange and unpredictable ways. There are entire dead worlds where reality is so thin that things slip through, whispers that drive men mad, shadows that move on their own, ships that vanish into the void without a trace. And while the Imperium often attributes these disappearances to the dangers of warp travel, the Drukhari don't even use the warp in the same way. They navigate through the webway, staying as far away from chaos-tainted space as possible. The fact that they were caught means one of two things. Either something came out of the warp and took them, or worse, they were trapped inside. There are reports, unverified but eerily consistent, of strange signals emanating from deep within the expanse. Rogue traders have spoken of fleeting glimpses of ships moving in impossible formations, flickering between real space and something else. Some claim to have received transmissions that sound like screams, stretched, distorted, looping endlessly until they cut off mid-sentence. If these are remnants of the Drukhari fleet, then they didn't just die, they were pulled into something beyond mortal understanding. But what would chaos even want with the Drukhari fleet? The answer is simple: suffering. The Drukhari thrive on pain, feeding off torment to sustain their withered souls. To the dark gods, this makes them perfect playthings. Imagine a warband of Chaos Space Marines, perhaps a splinter of the Night Lords or the Word Bearers, sensing a disturbance in the webway, finding a way to lure the Khari into an ambush. Not to kill them outright, but to break them, to tear apart their minds and bodies in ways that would make even Kamara seem merciful. And then, of course, there's the possibility that it wasn't mortals at all. There are things in the warp that don't care about loyalty, strategy, or ambition. There are entities that exist only to feed, to corrupt, to consume. A Drukhari fleet filled with the essence of suffering would be like a beacon to such horrors. Imagine an entire call, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, watching as their sleek void ships were dragged into a nightmare realm, their warriors turned into screaming echoes of themselves, their souls eaten by something that doesn't even have a name. Some have speculated that this could have been the work of a daemon prince, perhaps a champion of Slaanesh, drawn to the Drukhari's twisted existence, seeing them not as rivals, but as offerings. The Drukhari, after all, defy Slaanesh's natural order. They should have been devoured long ago, but through their rituals and their endless cruelty, they have prolonged their existence at the cost of others. What if this fleet finally pushed too far? What if, in the depths of the Koronis Expanse, they encountered something they couldn't outrun? Something that made them pay for every stolen soul they had ever taken? The most horrifying part of this theory is that if chaos was responsible, we may never truly know what happened. If they were taken into the warp, there's no coming back, no wreckage, no survivors, no lingering clues, just the creeping, unshakable feeling that somewhere, beyond the veil of reality, the Drukhari are still suffering, still screaming, and worst of all, still aware. If there's any force in the galaxy that could make a Drukhari fleet disappear without a trace, it's the Necrons. Unlike chaos, which leaves madness and corruption in its wake, or the Imperium, which at least leaves wreckage behind, the Necrons have a way of making their enemies simply cease to exist. No distress signals, no survivors, no lingering evidence of battle, just silence. And if the Necrons were involved in the disappearance of the Drukhari fleet in the Koronis Expanse, then those sadistic raiders never stood a chance. The Necrons have been waking up all across the galaxy, reclaiming their ancient tomb worlds and purging anything they see as a threat or an infestation. And let's be clear, from the Necron perspective, everything is an infestation. They are the rightful rulers of the galaxy, the original masters of the stars, and they have absolutely no tolerance for lesser beings interfering in what they consider their domain. The Koronis Expanse, with its history of lost civilizations and unexplored voids, is exactly the kind of place where Necron tombs could be hidden, lying dormant for millions of years. So, what happens when a Drukhari fleet, arrogant and overconfident, stumbles upon a tomb world they shouldn't have? The answer is simple: extermination. And unlike the Imperium or Chaos, the Necrons don't just kill their enemies, they erase them. Necron technology is so far beyond anything the Drukhari have encountered that it's almost unfair. Their ships don't rely on the warp, don't need the webway, and don't even operate on the same basic principles as Imperial voidcraft. They phase in and out of real space, appearing where they want, when they want. Their weapons don't just blast apart ships, they disassemble them, atom by atom, stripping away matter until there's nothing left. The Drukhari, for all their speed and cunning, would be completely outmatched against this kind of firepower. And there's something uniquely terrifying about the way Necrons fight. They don't rage, they don't scream, they don't taunt their enemies, they don't even hate them. They simply execute their directives with cold, unrelenting precision. A Drukhari fleet relying on its ability to ambush, outmaneuver, and escape would find itself completely outclassed. You can't outrun something that teleports. You can't ambush something that doesn't need eyes to see you. And you definitely can't escape when your ships are being deleted mid-flight by weapons designed to unmake reality itself. If the Necrons were responsible, that would explain why there were no survivors, no distress calls, and no wreckage. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. The moment the Drukhari set foot in the wrong system, their fate was sealed. There's also the fact that the Drukhari have history with the Necrons. While they don't encounter them as often as the Imperium or the Orcs, the times they have crossed paths have been disastrous. Drukhari technology is ancient and advanced, but it's still based on Eldar principles, and the Eldar were the Necrons' sworn enemies during the War in Heaven. The Necrons have spent millions of years refining their methods for destroying anything Eldar-related. They know how to counter them. They specialize in it. Some rumors suggest that the Koronis Expanse is home to a particularly ancient Necron dynasty, one that isn't interested in playing the slow game of reclaiming its empire piece by piece. Instead, they wipe out anything that enters their space, leaving no evidence behind. If that's the case, then the Drukhari may have triggered an automated defense system so powerful that they were obliterated before they even had a chance to understand what was happening. A fleet-wide reality-disrupting weapon, a chain reaction of cascading annihilation protocols. Whatever it was, it worked flawlessly. The scariest part? If this was the work of the Necrons, then the Drukhari never even had a chance to warn Komara. And that means the same trap is still out there, waiting. The Drukhari were just the first to stumble into it. Who will be next? The Koronis Expanse has always been a place of mystery. It's not just some lawless frontier filled with rogue traders and forgotten worlds. It's a region where reality itself seems unstable, where things disappear without explanation, and where some places simply don't make sense. And that raises an unsettling question. What if the Drukhari fleet didn't fall victim to an enemy we know, but instead encountered something completely unknown? There are countless stories about strange Xenos entities lurking in the dark corners of the galaxy, species that don't fit into the usual categories of war-hungry orcs, scheming Eldar, or mindless Tyranids. The Imperium only records what it can record, and there are plenty of places where even the most dedicated explorers refuse to go. The Koronis Expanse is one of those places. Some theorize that it is home to an ancient, unseen force, something that does not interact with the galaxy so much as it observes it, waiting for the right moment to act. One of the strangest theories suggests that the Drukhari stumbled into a pocket of space where the laws of physics simply don't work the way they should. The galaxy is already filled with anomalies. Warp storms, time distortions, areas where gravity bends in impossible ways. But what if there was a place where everything was wrong? A region where ships don't just break down, but fade away? Where weapons don't fire because cause and effect don't line up properly? Some believe that in the depths of the expanse, there are areas where reality itself shifts, where ships enter but never leave, not because they were destroyed, but because they were rewritten, turned into something else entirely. Then there's the possibility of an unknown Xenos race, something completely outside of the Imperium's records. It's easy to assume that we know all the major players in the galaxy, but the truth is, the Warhammer 40k universe is vast beyond comprehension. There could be entire civilizations that have avoided detection, either through sheer isolation or by design. What if the Drukhari raided the wrong world? What if they targeted a species that does not lose? Imagine a race so advanced that they don't wage war in the traditional sense. No fleets, no armies, no planetary invasions, just the quiet, methodical elimination of anything that enters their territory. The Drukhari, masters of stealth and cruelty, would have assumed they were the hunters. But what if, for the first time, they were the prey? Some of the more disturbing theories suggest the fleet encountered an intelligence so alien that their usual tactics, speed, deception, and terror meant nothing. A species that does not think in ways that can be understood, that does not leave wreckage or bodies because it does not kill in a way we recognize. There have been unconfirmed reports of ships going dark in the expanse, of entire expeditions that simply never return. No distress signals, no last stands, just silence. And then, of course, there are the darker whispers. That the Koronis Expanse is not just a void, but a prison. That something was locked away there long ago, something even the old ones feared. The Drukhari, in their arrogance, may have broken a seal they didn't even know existed. They may have freed something that should have stayed buried. Or worse, they may have become part of it, absorbed into something beyond comprehension. Whatever happened to the fleet, one thing is certain: it didn't just lose a battle. It was erased. And that means whatever is lurking in the Koronis Expanse is still out there, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to wander into its domain. If there's one thing you can always count on with the Drukhari, it's betrayal. These aren't warriors bound by honor or loyalty. There's no grand unifying cause that keeps them working together. The only thing that truly matters in Kamara is power. Who has it, who wants it, and who's about to lose it. So, could the disappearance of the Drukhari fleet in the Koronis Expanse have been the result of internal treachery? Absolutely. In fact, out of all the theories, this might be the most Drukhari explanation of all. Drukhari society is built on backstabbing. Every Cabal, every Archon, every witch cult is locked in a constant struggle to climb higher while making sure their rivals don't do the same. Alliances are fleeting, trust is non-existent, and the moment you turn your back, you're already a corpse. You just don't know it yet. Fleet engagements aren't just about raiding and pillaging. They're about positioning yourself for the next move in an endless game of power. If an ambitious Archon saw an opportunity to take out a rival without consequences, why wouldn't they? There are a few ways this kind of betrayal could have played out. One theory suggests that the fleet never actually made it to the Koronis Expanse intact, that the betrayal happened before the real battle even started. Maybe one of the Archons leading the fleet was lured into an ambush by their own allies, tricked into believing they had secured a lucrative target, only to find themselves surrounded by other Drukhari ships, their supposed comrades turning on them the moment they were vulnerable. A premeditated culling, executed with ruthless precision. Another possibility is that the betrayal happened mid-raid. Drukhari fleets are not unified forces. They are collections of individual cabals, each with their own interests, their own ambitions. If one cabal saw an opportunity to eliminate the competition and claim all the spoils for themselves, they might have done exactly that. Imagine the chaos. Half the fleet engaged in a brutal skirmish against Imperial defenders, the other half suddenly turning on them, firing on their own kind, boarding their own allies' ships in a frenzy of violence. By the time the dust settled, there was nothing left. No survivors, no ships to return, just a bloody void filled with the wreckage of a civil war no one would ever speak of. Then there's the most insidious theory: sabotage. What if someone in the fleet was compromised before they even set out? What if an Archon, a Drakon, or even a single trusted retainer had been working against their own cabal the entire time? Drukhari warfare isn't just about open battle. It's about poison in your wine, whispered lies in the right ears, a blade between the ribs when you least expect it. Someone could have sabotaged the fleet from within, crippling key ships, disabling escape routes, feeding false intelligence that led them straight into a trap. And if that's the case, the real question isn't how they did it, but why. Was it a desperate act to appease a more powerful rival back in Kamara? A calculated move to eliminate a dangerous competitor before they could rise any higher? Or, if you want to get really paranoid, was it an outside force manipulating the Drukhari into destroying themselves? The Imperium, Chaos, even the Necrons. Any of them could have planted the seeds of discord, knowing that the Drukhari's own nature would do the rest. The Drukhari don't need enemies to be dangerous. They are their own worst threat. If the fleet was destroyed by betrayal, it wouldn't just be a mystery. It would be a warning. Because if an entire cabal can be wiped out in secret, without anyone taking credit, then it means the power struggles in Kamara are reaching a level even the Drukhari themselves don't fully understand. Kamara thrives on whispers, on secrets traded like currency, on lies that hold more weight than truth. When something big happens, something like the complete disappearance of a Drukhari fleet, you can be sure that the Dark City is buzzing with speculation. But here's the thing. In Komarov, no one ever admits they don't know what's going on. Every Archon, every Drakon, every scheming sycophant will claim they knew this would happen. That they foresaw the downfall of whatever unfortunate cabal was wiped from existence. And yet, behind all the arrogance and feigned indifference, there's a very real, very unsettling question lingering in the shadows. How does an entire fleet just vanish? For some, this is cause for celebration. There's a certain glee in watching another cabal fall, especially if they were rivals. Fewer competitors mean more room for ambition, more opportunities to expand influence, more spoils to claim in the aftermath. Archons who once gritted their teeth at the power of the lost fleet now smirk in their private chambers, sipping on stolen souls, already plotting how to carve up whatever assets remain. In Kamara, the weak don't get funerals. They get forgotten. And yet, despite the outward apathy, even the most ruthless lords of the city can't ignore the deeper implications. Because this wasn't just a failed raid. This wasn't a skirmish gone wrong, or a battle lost to superior firepower. This was a complete erasure. No wreckage returned. No survivors fled back through the webway to tell the tale. Even the most reckless cabals rarely suffer total annihilation. If nothing else, someone always manages to crawl back, whispering their final, agonized warnings before their essence is drained for amusement. But this time, nothing. And that is a problem. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some claim that the fleet was devoured by something in the Koronis Expanse. Some thing that defies explanation. Something so ancient and so powerful that even the Drukhari, in all their cruelty and cunning, were helpless before it. Others insist that this was no accident, but a carefully orchestrated move by a rival cabal, a masterstroke of treachery so flawless that the victims never even saw it coming. And then there are the more paranoid rumors, whispers that someone in Kamara knew this would happen, that the fleet was sent to be erased, perhaps to cover up some deeper conspiracy that no one dares to speak aloud. And of course, there are those who refuse to believe the fleet is truly gone. Drukhari arrogance is not so easily broken, and many refuse to accept that their kin could be so thoroughly wiped from existence. Some suggest that the fleet is still out there, trapped in some unknown dimension, caught in a fate worse than death. Maybe they were taken by the warp, doomed to wander a twisted reflection of real space where time has no meaning. Maybe they were claimed by some forgotten Xenos force, their bodies kept as trophies, their souls harvested for some unfathomable purpose. Maybe, just maybe, they have become something else entirely. The more superstitious elements of Kamara whisper that this is an omen, a sign that something is shifting in the great game of power. The Drukhari like to believe that they are untouchable, that no force in the galaxy can truly threaten their way of life. But the vanishing of an entire fleet suggests otherwise. It suggests that even the masters of suffering can suffer in ways they never imagined. And if that's the case, the real question isn't just what happened to the fleet. It's what happens next. Because in Kamara, fear is weakness. And if this mystery isn't solved soon, if the whispers continue to spread, then one simple truth will become undeniable. For the first time in a very, very long time, the Drukhari don't know what they're dealing with. And that should terrify them more than anything else. The disappearance of the Drukhari fleet in the Koronis Expanse isn't just a mystery. It's an opportunity. And in the grim darkness of the far future, someone is always waiting to take advantage of an opening. When a major player like a Drukhari cabal suddenly ceases to exist, the power vacuum doesn't stay empty for long. There are consequences, ripple effects that spread far beyond Kamara. The only question is, who stands to gain the most? For the Drukhari, this is both a humiliation and a warning. An entire fleet vanishing without a trace is not normal. It suggests weakness, vulnerability, two things that no Archon can afford to show. If the other cabals sense that one of their own has been removed from the board so cleanly, so decisively, they will descend like starving Lamaeans at a fresh kill. The remaining assets of the lost cabal, real space routes, hidden caches, alliances with lesser mercenaries, are now free real estate. The power struggle within Kamara is about to get even bloodier, with multiple factions looking to carve up what remains. Even those not directly involved will be watching, waiting to see who emerges stronger and who gets crushed beneath the weight of their own ambition. And then there's the bigger picture. The Imperium, for all its ignorance and stubbornness, is bound to take notice. If a Drukhari fleet was wiped out by some external force, whether it was the Necrons, Chaos, or something worse, then that means there's a new threat lurking in the void. A threat that can eliminate a Xenos force that has eluded the Imperium's grasp for millennia. If this was the result of an Imperial ambush, then whoever orchestrated it might be looking to expand their tactics. Could this be the start of a more aggressive anti-Drukhari campaign? A shift in how the Imperium deals with its most elusive enemy? It's hard to say, but if some inquisitor, rogue trader, or high-ranking naval commander managed to pull off this kind of operation, you can guarantee they're already planning their next move. The forces of chaos, if they were responsible, or even if they weren't, are likely reveling in the chaos this has caused. The Drukhari rarely involve themselves in the grand games of the ruinous powers, preferring their own brand of horror over the madness of the warp. But if something lurking in the Koronis Expanse managed to erase an entire cabal, then it's only a matter of time before chaos cults, warbands, and even demonic entities start sniffing around. Was this an accident? A cosmic fluke? Or was this a deliberate move, a trap that the Drukhari stumbled into? And if so, who laid it? The orcs, in their infinite simplicity, will likely see this as an invitation. A whole region of space suddenly lacking Drukhari raiders? That's a perfect opportunity for a whack to spread unchecked. Orcs don't care about mystery, about subtlety, about caution. If there's a void left by the missing fleet, you can bet that some warboss somewhere is already gathering his boys to fill it in the loudest, most explosive way possible. And then, of course, there's the worst possibility, that something new is out there. Something that the wider galaxy hasn't encountered before, or worse, something that was long thought forgotten. The Koronis Expanse has always been a place of unanswered questions, of void black secrets hidden beneath layers of myth and fear. What if this disappearance wasn't an isolated event? What if this was just the first sign that something is moving in the dark? One way or another, the disappearance of the Drukhari fleet won't just fade into obscurity. The galaxy doesn't work that way. Something happened in the Expanse, something no one fully understands yet. But whatever it was, it's going to shape the future in ways that no one, not even the Drukhari, are prepared for. And by the time the truth is revealed, it might already be too late. The disappearance of the Drukhari fleet in the Koronis Expanse isn't just another war story lost in the endless bloodshed of the 41st millennium. It's a mystery that refuses to die, an absence that echoes louder than any battle. No matter which theory you subscribe to, Imperial ambush, chaos incursion, Necron extermination, or something even more sinister, one thing is clear. This wasn't just bad luck. Something happened out there. Something deliberate. What makes this so unsettling isn't just that an entire fleet vanished. It's the fact that no one is taking credit. The Imperium isn't gloating about a grand victory. The forces of chaos aren't claiming another act of destruction in their god's name. Even the Drukhari, usually so eager to spin tales of treachery and betrayal, don't seem to know what happened. And that's rare, because for all their backstabbing, for all their endless power struggles, they always know. Or at least, they pretend to. But this time, there's only silence. Maybe that's what makes this mystery so compelling. If the Drukhari had been slaughtered in a war, if their fleet had been wiped out by overwhelming firepower, we'd have debris, survivors, battle reports. If this were a case of internal betrayal, some cabal somewhere would be flexing its newfound power, boasting of a perfectly executed coup. But instead, we have nothing. Just a gap where something should be. And that's terrifying, because in a galaxy this hostile, nothing just disappears. Every faction, every warlord, every desperate band of survivors leaves a trace, even if it's just the smoldering wreck of their final stand. But this is different. The Drukhari are not fools. They are not easily caught, and yet something caught them. Something erased them so completely that even the scavengers of Kamara have been left empty-handed. Maybe it was the Imperium testing a new weapon, some experimental void trap capable of cutting even the most elusive raiders off from their escape. Maybe it was chaos pulling them into a nightmare they will never wake from. Maybe they triggered the wrath of the Necrons, and their very atoms were stripped from reality by weapons older than human civilization itself. Or maybe, just maybe, this was something else. Something the galaxy isn't ready to face yet. And that's the part that sticks. Because if whatever did this is still out there, still waiting in the dark, then the Drukhari were just the first to fall. There will be others. More missing fleets, more unanswered questions, more empty space where something should be. And sooner or later, someone is going to stumble across the truth. The only question is whether they'll live long enough to tell anyone.